Today, we're diving into some controversy. Okay, not really real controversy, but I think you'll see what I mean. So in one of the most popular subreddits, credit cards, someone asked the controversial question, what is the most overrated credit card? You could see why this would cause some sparks, and let me tell you, the comment section in there didn't hold back. This turned into a mega thread, and what I thought would be cool to do would be to answer that question scientifically. Literally create an analytic and crowdsource all of these educated community members inside of Reddit to determine once and for all what the entire population just thought the most overrated credit card actually was. So let's jump right in. I thought this would be a great opportunity to sort of survey a massive pool of people who are very educated about credit cards and determine once and for all what they thought the most overrated credit card is. My scoring system works like this. The most overrated cards will get the most points. The ones that are least overrated or appropriately valued by the world, well, they'll be ending at the bottom with the least amount of points. Every main post calling out a card gets 5 points added to the card's total. Every reply agreeing with the post gets an additional point, and every upvote on one of those gets an additional point. However, I also subtracted points when someone downvoted or disagreed with a comment ripping into a credit card. So what that leaves us with is a high score being very bad, whereas a score closer to 0 is considered really good for the card. Now there were 467 upvotes on the original post and 642 comments overall, and much more voting in the comments themselves. So how long did this actually take me to do? Well, let me just say, you don't want to know, but I thought it would make for a fun video and maybe an educational piece as well. So let's start with tier number 1, those with the lowest score, which are the best for those cards. I'm calling this tier the, alright, these cards aren't so bad tier. Inside of tier 1, we have the Venture X, the US Bank Altitude Reserve, rest in peace, the Delta Sky Miles Reserve, the Robinhood Gold Card, which may or may not be released to some, the IHG One Rewards Card, Marriott Bonvoy Cards, Alaska Airlines, just Amex, got a lot of votes defending it, and Capital One Saver. In essence, everything in Tier 1 was mentioned a few times, but either got really defended or just didn't come up so much, and not a lot of momentum got behind calling any of those an overrated card, or in Amex's case, an issuer. I want to give you my thoughts on just a few that really stick out. The Capital One Venture X came in with a score of -41. In fact, it was the only negative score in the entire analysis. Hilariously, this indicates that anytime the Venture X was mentioned in a thread of overrated credit cards, it got tons of people defending it and saying, no, this card is legit. This card is everything it's promised to be. Now, I'm not going to pretend that the Venture X is the perfect card. However, for those of you who have watched this channel for a considerable time, you know that I pretty much value the Venture X as the single best premium category travel card, and that's because of a low effective annual fee, solid lounge access, and really fantastic earnings multipliers all bundled together make for a really good package. So I have to say, I completely agree with the folks in that Reddit thread. I may have even been downvoting every post calling the Venture X overrated. Just kidding. Maybe. Next up was the Robinhood Gold Card. This card barely made a blip in the thread and finished with a score of 6. In the positive, but still very good compared to some of the ones coming up in other tiers. I see the Robinhood Gold Card as having the potential to be an absolute disaster, depending on what Robinhood actually does with this card and how it performs in real life. However, at this point, it's just a blip on the radar because there is a long waiting list and only a few select people out there have actually gotten to test this card about a year after it was announced. So there's just not enough hype for people to feel very good or very bad about its potential at this point. The last one in Tier 1 I want to talk about is another Capital One card, the Capital One Saver card, which finished with a score of 10. The Saver card meets what it promises. It's not a flashy card at all, and it's got a small welcome bonus, no annual fee, but just gives you really great grocery and entertainment category multipliers, and it feels like the card hits a few really valuable categories that are kind of hard to find in other credit card setups. I also think it's worth pointing out that 2 Capital One flagship cards, the Venture X and Capital One Saver, were both extremely defended in this thread and in this little scope into the community. Now, with all the good ones aside, let's move into tier number 2. I'm calling tier number 2 the talks a big game credit card tier, because a lot of the cards on this list have some nice promises, nothing too flashy, but some of them are certainly accused for seriously under-delivering. Inside tier 2 are just Citi as an overall issuer, the Discover It, the Black Card from American Express, the Chase Sapphire Preferred, the Chase Freedom Unlimited, the Amex Blue Cash Preferred, and the Chase Trifecta as a whole. Got some serious discontent. Let me give you my opinion on a few of the more notable callouts. First of all, the Black Card finished with a score of 25. Another card that I think just flies under the radar because so few people have it or even think about it on a daily basis, and that's just because of how exclusive it is. This card has a $10,000 initiation fee and a $5,000 annual fee for holding it. And this isn't really a thought for most people because it's only available to select individuals that American Express privately contacts to offer a spot to apply for the card. If you're interested in benefits, this card gives you basically the highest membership status with most US hotels and a few select airlines as well. It also gives you really good lounge benefits and the access to an exclusive American Express concierge service, which apparently will do pretty much anything that you ask it to do. However, the card only earns 1x back on all purchases, and essentially, if you're trying to get your money's worth out of it, well, that may be relatively impossible given the initiation fee and the high annual fee, meaning that it probably should be more overrated, but just doesn't get the attention and hate that it really deserves. Next up, I was surprised to see the American Express Blue Cash Preferred with a score of 113. Now, the Amex Blue Cash Preferred, remember, is the $95 version of the Amex Blue Cash Everyday card. The Preferred earns you an impressive 6% back on groceries, but that is capped at $6,000 in annual spend. Most people were upset with this card just because it is a $95 annual fee, and some of them didn't see the value in the credits wiping that away, and also were frustrated with the cap and other cards that offer similar high multipliers, but don't have an annual fee attached. I personally feel like there's a very niche market for this card, but if you use it effectively, it has incredible value. So I slightly disagree with it being this high on the list, but I don't have a terrible problem because for most people, it's just not a great fit. Last up in this tier is the Chase Trifecta, earning a score of 152. People's problem with the Chase Trifecta wasn't necessarily any of the cards itself, but simply the hype it gets. It's true, you do see the Trifecta talked about everywhere. People also get upset that even if you accumulate all 3 cards, you really don't have a good grocery card or any gas options in there too. Just too many cards and too much management for 2 critically missing categories. Now let's move into tier 3. And the only thing I can possibly call this tier is the straight up overrated tier. And that's because people feel very passionately that all cards on this list are just plain overrated. Inside the straight up overrated tier appears the Amex Platinum, the Apple Card, the Citi Custom Cash, the Amex Gold, and Chase just overall as an issuer. Now we're entering the danger zone, the territory where people have gotten these cards and are starting to feel seriously ripped off. Let's talk about the Amex Platinum. This card logged a score of 174, so some serious weight behind it being overrated. I think the biggest problem is that this card is seen simply everywhere. You cannot go online or you cannot watch TV without seeing an advertisement trying to get you to invest in a $695 annual fee. The other side of that is a lot of the advertisements really paint the picture that your travel is going to be luxurious, it'll be hands-free, it'll be very, very easy, and the Amex Platinum is your ticket to doing that. However, actual experiences with the Amex Platinum, if you want to get good value from these cards and unlock everything that's promised, well, that's a lot of tracking. That's a lot of looking at your credits. That's a lot of reading fine print about what you can and when you can actually use benefits. I think that comparison to how it's advertised versus how it's actually working in play is where the frustration comes from. Even higher on the overrated list than the Platinum card was the Apple Card. With a score of 198, this card used to be the sleek, cool card on the block, and with everything Apple does, the emphasis is on design and functionality and how it all looks. And that's great, but I think everybody's problem was that the 3% categories being so niche fell off very quickly. the daily cash back, that lost kind of its buzz and its excitement once you start using it. And just the functionality with it being plainly weaker than pretty much every card out there by the big banks, the shine on this card wears off very, very quickly. Next up was a card that almost doubled the overrated votes that the Apple Card got, and this is the Citi Custom Cash. Now, I am personally shocked to see this card so high. It is 5% back in your top spending category, assigned automatically. There is a $500 cap a month, but how picky can you get when you're getting 5% cash back on whatever really you want to spend in a focused category? What this came down to is people felt like they had to get 2 or 3 custom caches and always pay attention to make sure they're spending the right card in the right category, really trying to game the system there. But to them, I would tell you, this is an awesome card for most normal people. Don't be too harsh on the custom cash. However, the thread wasn't having it, and that's why it's placed so high on this list. And the highest credit card left in tier 3 to talk about is the Amex Gold Card. You probably could have guessed that this would be a very highly overrated credit card, and it's no surprise that it accumulated 431 points through this method of ranking the cards. This was actually the most mentioned card throughout the entire thread, and it's simply a critically polarizing credit card. The fact that the annual fee has recently risen and there are more credits frustrates a lot of people. The other side of this is pretty much everybody gets marketed this card. However, it only really gives users a good chance to get value on the back end out of it if you live in certain geographical areas. If you're not living in a top 20 to 40 city in the United States in terms of population, you're already at a natural disadvantage for being able to use this card and the credits that it has for their full value. That's got to get frustrating, and certainly I can see why many would think that this card is indeed overrated. Tier 4 is a tier all by itself. This tier is simply the single most overrated credit card, and the reason you're still watching and waiting to see what this ended up being at this point in the video. Shockingly, this card is the Chase Sapphire Reserve, and this card received a landslide of discontent calling it overrated and finished with a final score by this scoring system of 1,522 points. That is absolutely terrible. Let's dive into the reasons why. First, people desperately want a refreshed version of this card, and it seems that Chase is simply not putting in the effort to make it a competitive card in 2025. Second, people feel that the annual fee is simply too high. This card comes in with an annual fee of $550. Finally, this is multiple factors at once, but people believe that there is a perceived loss of value for holding the card over time. Once you get past the $300 travel credit, which is the most flexible and most forgiving travel credit that I see in credit cards today, you're still left with a $250 annual fee, which for a lot of people is very significant. You feel like you should be getting some real benefits out of that. However, the biggest draw is the 1.5x multiplier that Chase promises in the portal. However, once you spend your points down and are in the rebuilding phase in bringing up your account, what benefits are you really getting from the Chase Sapphire Reserve? And why is it worth keeping the card in that sometimes really extended period while you're still building up that balance? That dead period with the reserve can be really frustrating. Finally, there's cards like the Venture X, which have much more competitive annual fees for essentially the same benefits. Or if you're really into traveling that much, a lot of people are finding good value with airline-specific cards and just ignoring the Chase ecosystem as a whole. Even though I like Chase, I can objectively see why this card gets called extremely overrated. All right, before we go, I have to run through some honorable mention comments deep inside this thread that I wanted to share with you all because I thought that they were funny. Florida Man 42069 says that the most overrated card is the credit card you pay an annual fee for and don't use. Yes, very true. I think there are a lot of people out there who have that sneaky problem. Throw It All Away Forever One says Credit One. And this got a few downvotes, and most people think it's because Credit One is appropriately rated, and everybody understands that they're garbage and to be avoided at all costs. And Pizza Cat Taco Uno says that debit cards suck. And yes, the stance in this channel is that generally, if you're trying to get the most from your spend, debit cards and the nothing that they offer you are not the way to go. So now it's your turn, and I gave you some of my feedback as I went through the different tiers in the scoring system that I created. I'd love to hear which credit card that you believe we are being sold a false bill of goods and is unbelievably overrated down in the comments. And hey, if you enjoyed the breakdown, like and subscribe to the channel. It'll show the YouTube algorithm that this channel is not overrated.